of business is our attendance. I'll run through the roster. Co-Chair Bob Phillips.
Present.
Co-Chair Stephen Oshaw, I'm here. Rep Corvacey.
Here.
Rep Diaz.
Here.
Rep Kazarian.
Here.
Rep Newberry. Rep Place. Senator Dela Cruz, I believe she's in Senate Finance. Senator Felag, he notified me he's on his way, so we'll hold his attendance. Senator Quesada. Here. Senator Rogers. Senator Cisnowski's also in Finance. She notified she'd be on her way. House appointee Antonio Lopes.
Here.
House appointee Caprice Ranshaw. Rep Ucci.
Here.
Senate appointee Maria Bucci. Senator Metz.
Present.
Senate appointee Alvin Reyes.
Here.
We have a quorum. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started tonight, I want to read you an announcement. First, in the next 2 weeks, we will be scheduling an additional hearing at the State House. The purpose of that meeting will be to discuss the issue of counting prisoners at the ACI. There's been a lot raised about that issue, and we want to deal with it head on in this session. It's going to provide the Commission with an opportunity to discuss the issue in depth with Kim Brace. Just so all of you know, Kim's been unable to travel to Rhode Island at this present time because he's recovering from a medical procedure. But he will be available to discuss the issue within the next 2 weeks. Secondly, for our next meeting, which is going to be on Monday, October 25th, there's a venue change. The meeting will now be held at Kickamut Middle School Auditorium. That's at 525 Child Street in Warren. Let me say that again. Kickamut Middle School Auditorium, 525 Child Street in Warren. There was a technical issue with the connectivity at Mount Hope High School in Bristol, so we had to change that venue. I'd like to acknowledge that Maria Bucci is now with us, and I'll note her attendance as being here. Of course. I'm going to turn it over to Co-Chair Phillips. He has an announcement that he wants to amplify on in light of the prison issue.
Just so everyone will know, we are getting written testimony in. We've asked for written testimony from different people, and we have 3 pieces tonight. We have one from the Honorable Joseph McNamara, we have one from the ACLU, and we have one from the Prison Policy Initiative. So we're going to be reading those and studying those and see how we can address the prison issue as we move forward in the next few weeks when we have the meeting for finding out how we're going to be able to handle this, how we can wrap our heads around all this stuff, because there are some circumstances that are pros and cons on each way. So we'll just work on it there, and we'll read these. And as soon as we get more written testimony, we'll be disseminating it to all of the commission members. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Certainly, thank you. Senator Metz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I want to thank the co-chairs for being sensitive to this issue. I know this has been an ongoing initiative for an independent legislation, and I know Senator Quesada was a co-sponsor in the Senate this year to continue this legacy. And we can't say that it's we can't do it. We got to wait another 10 years. And I'm reminded of Dr. King's letter in the Birmingham Jail when he said, "Justice too long delayed is justice denied." So this is an issue that has to be addressed. We can't put it off again. This is something we've been trying to do for years. Senator Quesada supported me for years on this issue. She picked up the ball and ran with it this year. And I want to thank you for to continue this, because we have to address it. We can't sweep it under the rug any longer. So again, thank you. I thank the ACLU, and I thank the prison-based gerrymandering organization out of Massachusetts. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Metz. If anyone's ever read a letter from Birmingham Jail, Dr. King wrote that on toilet paper, one of the most articulate letters you'll ever read. Talk about use of metaphors and analogies. Unbelievable, the brilliance of Dr. King. Anyways, thank you, Senator. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge we have with us tonight Senator Burke, Senator Anderson, and Rep. Bennett with us, and many other distinguished guests. So Without further ado, Ryan, we're going to turn it over to you. If you would give us an overview of the redistricting process. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I look forward to hearing more about what we can learn from the ACI with their data. This is the 8th meeting of the Commission. As you said, we have one more scheduled with what we term to be round 1 of the roadshow, to where we can introduce the redistricting concepts and the local data that is going to be affecting the local districts when the statewide redistricting process as it goes. And I'm very proud to be here to where we can focus on the towns and the communities that make up Kent County. After that, I will show some online tools that we have for public input that we are really interested in gaining. That'll be the RI-Redistricting.org website, where we have collected all of our research and also posted all the live streaming of the hearings as well as the testimony submitted. And then I'll talk about the website that we have for the public to submit their ideas on communities of interest, as well as the My Districting site for district proposals. And then I'll open it up for public testimony. Kent County is in the middle of the state. A lot of, when you talk about redistricting, being in the middle means that you are kind of at the mercy of everything that goes around you. And so I wanted to show this slide again. We produced it for the first meeting, but it's where we show the population change from 2010 to 2020 by city and town. I will show later in the next slide to where the Warwick districts are undersized, but it's not because of population lost. Warwick did gain population, but as you can see, all the towns to the north of it in the dark green have outsized the growth, and thus is affecting what Warwick and districts can be, because Warwick did not grow at the same rate as a lot of other towns in the state. But no town in Kent County lost population. In fact, West Warwick and East Greenwich grew quite a bit. This is the map that shows by town and city how they are going to shift their districts. You can see Warwick in the dark gray symbolizes the biggest loss of seats, along with Narragansett and East Providence. That basically means being undersized means the lines have to expand so that they take in more population, and then that affects the district to the next of it, which affects the district to the next of it as they are redrawn. Eventually, this balances out with districts that I'm showing in the dark pink. Those districts are oversized and their lines need to contract. So redistricting is kind of the art and science and data science of trying to balance out all the districts to be legally within a window so that the one person, one vote principle can apply to all Rhode Island voters.
Ryan, if I may, just for the edification of everybody who's here and who's watching, can you just amplify for a minute on the census and how we came to these numbers, where some jurisdictions, some towns increased and some decreased?
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about like the factors that have happened?
Yeah, just a general overview. I mean, some of this we've heard so many times that we know it, but for the public who may not know and those sitting here tonight, if you could just amplify, you don't have to go off long, but just enough to explain it. Thanks.
Of course, of course. As we have studied the state as a whole, we've seen quite a few trends. As you know, that the census took place, the census date was April 1st of 2020, and the COVID lockdown was in the middle of March, if I'm correct on that. You'll see areas that had a lot of students, university students that were living off campus. Those areas fell in population. We saw that in Narragansett, around Providence College, quite possibly around Roger Williams in Bristol. And so as a whole, some of those areas shrunk in population, and then we can compare that to some of the towns up north, like Cumberland, Central Falls, in Providence that saw quite a lot of development. In Cumberland, you have new housing tracts. In Providence, you have loft conversions that where one building is now taking in 300 or 400 residents. All those trends together with a loss of population or a stagnation of population, when you compare it to what has been going on with developing towns, show that, as I'm showing here, they do lose some representation. They will still be represented, but the districts that they're in have to grow. One example like I know about in Warwick is the airport. The T.F. Green Airport runway was expanded to accommodate larger aircraft. Well, because it expanded and there was neighborhoods surrounding the airport, on both sides of the runway, those houses needed to be demolished through eminent domain because of safety. An approaching jet, the greatest risk is the approach, and so you can't have planes landing right over homes. So all the homes that were south of the runway at TF Green had to be taken by eminent domain, and they are no longer there. So there was a loss of population in Warwick that I can show in a few slides. Does that suffice?
It does, thank you. I think that helps everyone. Please, go ahead. Thank you for
It is
doing
just
that.
it's the basics of redistricting, those factors that play out with the data counts, and then that's what leads to the redrawing. So it's a very important notion that I'm happy to expand on. This is the districts of the state senate. Everyone that's in dark pink is oversized, and every district that is in gray scale is undersized. And this, so as you can see, like everything on the East Bay is undersized, and that growth is going to ripple up the East Bay. Warwick is on the other side of the bay, so it's going to be maybe a different dynamic. But like I said, not every district in Kent County is undersized. District 9 and District 33 are oversized. So the trick is going to be balancing out all the districts. This is the same map for the State House, and you can see the same regions with Warwick being undersized, but we also see the West and East Greenwich Beach districts are oversized. Now, basically being in the center of the state, you could have the perfect size district, but it's not going to stay that way because it's affected by all the districts in the state. If you draw from the south to the north, that ripple could reach it. If you draw from the north to the south, that ripple will reach it. And so it's very hard. It is very hard to start in the center because you can easily run into problems when you reach a state border and have nowhere to go. So I've been telling people in this, residents of the area, it will be interesting to see, but we're going to have two different maps drafted, and we'll start from different regions of the state, and then that allows us to see different variations and one of them, hopefully, we're gonna find the best fit. The census population for Rhode Island was 1,097,379, just enough to keep its second Congress, U.S. House. We do draw those congressional districts to be exactly the same. Past Supreme Court decisions have found that they need to be very, very equal. And then so what we normally do is we keep towns whole with a split in Providence between the two districts to arrive at that exact number. The state senate, we are shooting for a ideal population of 28,878, but we do have a window there that we can work with, which I appreciate because it means less need to split towns or communities of interest when you have that flexibility. But you have to be careful. You can't. It's hard to have a bunch oversized districts because that needs to be balanced out elsewhere in the state. So you try and draw it ideally as possible within the values that the community has and the state has set forth. One of which, let's please not split towns unnecessarily and cause problems for the town clerks. The 75 House districts, we're shooting for a population of 14,632. Okay, we are in
Ryan, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I want to acknowledge Caprice Ranchero is with us. Good evening, Caprice. Please, go ahead, continue.
This is the population change from 2010 map of Kent County. I'd like to thank the data scientists at socialexplorer.com. Can be quite a lot of work that goes into comparing census change between decades, because the census often does not keep the same lines for delineating the tracts and block groups. And the block groups definitely allow us to look closer and find where there has been change. The most prominent change that I show in red, on these maps, both here and in Providence, red means a loss of population. And we can see that around the airport. But we also see really big growth in East Greenwich, in the more rural part of the town.
Let me interrupt you again, Ryan. Senator Felag is now with us. I'll acknowledge his attendance as well. Please go ahead.
Okay. Race is a very important part of redistricting. We are following the Voting Rights Act as close as we can. It is very important. Providence has a more diverse population, and we have heard a lot of testimony about trying to keep all the communities together that we can, and that's very important. I do want to take this time to talk about what is going on in Kent County and try and explain some more of the different ways that we can look at the data. There is two questions on the census. One relates to race, and the other relates to Hispanic origin. As you can see, if you look at just race alone, the Kent County is 86% white, 2% black, 1/3% Native American, 3%, I'm rounding here, 3% Asian, very, very, very small Pacific Islander population, and just over 2% other. 6.3 said they were multiple race. You can check up to the prior 6 races, you can check that you are more than one. And that makes up the multiple race. And those figures equal a 100%. Often when I do maps and analysis and interpretation, I go to non-Hispanic race alone, which, as you can see, extracts the populations that marked it that they were Hispanic origin. In Kent County, it was 5.7%. And so you can see all the racial populations fell a little bit because we're taking out the ones that identified as Hispanic origin, and that equals 100%. That is, I feel that is the kind of the basic way to look at race. If you're only looking at it from the most simplest point of view, because you do account for Hispanics, and you account for everybody in that count just once. It equals 100%. But when you talk about multiple race, there is a way to look at that to paint a better picture of the true community feeling. And that is when you look, if you can see that I'm no longer accounting for the multiple race in the line that I call race combined. You can see that now whites are 92%, blacks have doubled to 3.5%, Native Americans have shot up from 0.2 to almost 2%. What you're doing is that means that quite a few, for example, Native Americans that live in Kent County mark themselves as multiple race. Because every race you see an increase. That is, everyone who considers marked black is counted, no matter if they were African American alone or in combination with another race. So this is even a more accurate picture of the community. But as you can see, it's more than 100%, and that can confuse some people. But the answer is simply, we're double counting the populations, or triple counting if they mark themselves as 3 races. So that double counting does mean that all the percentages add up to 107%. It's not an error. It is truth when you're looking at the data that way. We have all this data, and definitely as we draw districts, we will be reporting these figures as well as race alone. When you look at non-Hispanic race combined, but we extract the race, we do extract all of them, so it's the same 5.7%, and then the non-Hispanic races, you see a small drop. And we do the exact same for voting age. You know, voting age is the population that can vote. And so it would be, we do include those figures in any district plan or analysis as well. The numbers were smaller than in Providence, but I did want to point out that Kent is getting much more diverse since 2000. In 2000, the population was 95.5% white. It is now 86%. All races have, almost all races, every single one has increased their population in this part of the state. The biggest increase being multiple race and Hispanic. I've gone back to Social Explorer. I do love this site. There's so much good data to explore on it. I'm showing now how the races have changed by percentage point in the county. This is non-Hispanic, or this is actually, I think they do count Hispanics in there. So this is the white population, and everywhere, every block group, they are a smaller number than 10 years ago. The African American populations has seen growth in West Warwick and the bordering parts of Warwick, as well as a small change in the rest of the county. Asians have moved to a little the same area of Warwick, and also in abundance in East Greenwich. I included the map of other because there does seem to be some evidence that a lot of the population who considers themselves Hispanic marked other on the census form, because we see a real jump in population across the county. But this is where the Hispanics have grown. Almost every single block group, they are a much higher part of the population. And the multi-race, we saw that big jump in the census table. It is the same in Providence. It's the same here. It's the same everywhere in the state. People who marked themselves 2 or more races had a big jump in their census response. All of this information can be seen on the state redistricting website that we run. It's www.riredistricting.org. You'll be able to see these maps, this PowerPoint, the testimony, and as soon as it's posted, a live stream of this hearing. And it also has our contact information so that you can know how to get a hold of us and get on our email list. We are preparing reports of the hearings that we can send out to everybody that has signed up to provide a summary of everything that we have learned and discussed at the hearings. And we look forward to getting that out as soon as possible. So I do encourage everyone to sign up on the list from the website. And that's the best way to communicate with us. I'd like to move now forward to a way that we can have the users of the interested public participate with us in a way that they couldn't 10 years ago. We have linked in the website our communities of interest website. This is where the users can create their own. We are highly excited to use all of the information that we get from the public about communities of interest, whether racial groups or business groups, or environmental justice groups, anything that can be thought of as a localized geographic community, we like to know about, because they will help us immensely to create the best district plans that we have, that we can do. Just this week, we finally got up our district proposal website that was called My Districting. This is the web tool for anybody to be able to not make just communities of interest, but they're making actual district proposals, and they will be able to work with a completely blank slate if they have an idea, or they can work off of the existing districts and amend them to be legal sized, or whether they think it should go down a certain street to make sure that they encompass a community of interest that should be kept together. It's a little bit more complicated than drawing a community of interest, but we tried to create a very informative tutorial guide that I had some printouts at the sign-in table, and that can also be downloaded from our website. And we are making ourselves available at the State House by appointment.
Ryan, excuse me, Senator Metz.
Yeah, at the end of Monday's meeting, a couple of people approached me at the end, and they're pretty tech savvy. They had a little trouble navigating the website.
Okay.
And so they brought that to my attention. So if that happens, who can they contact? You?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. I'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you. Ryan, if I may, before you start again, will you just again amplify on what these communities of interest are? In the earlier sessions that we had, there were a lot of questions asked by members of the committee about what is a community of interest? How do you define it? How does it work? And so we've all had the benefit of that. And for those of you who haven't, if you just take a couple of minutes, Ryan, to explain what is a community of interest best you can, and how do we interpret that?
At its most simple, it is a group of persons, population that strives to have a voice together. That if they are kept whole, their interests can be better served in the state government or the local wards. It's we have the example of the Cape Verdean community come up multiple times, and under the context of their community has been split into multiple districts, and they feel that they don't have a strong voice because their population has been kind of fractured into multiple districts where they live. That is a community of interest because they desire, their interest is having a strong voice in politics that will be strengthened if they are not made into small fractions of multiple districts, but yet can be contained and have a strong voice in fewer districts. That's an example of an ethnic group. The Port of Providence has a neighborhood that has been where there is health statistics that show that they are suffering from possible effects on the port, and that can be rectified if they have a political voice, and that will come from being a strong part of a political district that they also don't want to be split. That's an example of probably if there is a business community that's trying to enhance their facades or their parking, and if they're kept in there, if they're split into multiple city wards, some of them might not feel that they have the ability to really ask for an improvement in the way that the city is distributing resources. And so they would consider themselves a community of interest that would want to have a stronger voice. And when you do have single-member districts, it really is a matter of, well, please don't break us apart that would weaken our voice. I think that's three.
Okay, I'd like to acknowledge Senator Sosnowski is now with us. And if I could just one second. So what's too large, from what we've learned in the past, would be an entire town. That's too large, right?
That is definitely too large. That's why I try and say localized, which means that you can kind of pinpoint the community, and that it's small, but it's small enough to be encompassed in a district, which for the State House is only 14,600 people. The city of South Kingstown is in the way higher than that. So
and
of course
the concept is not to divide a particular interest group, right? That's what I've gleaned from this. Whether it's based on race or community function that gets together, or special meetings that happen within a certain area. You want to keep that group together and use that group's best interest within the district. Is that correct?
That is correct. But it goes even beyond that. It's we heard from testimony in Providence how a neighborhood they had to call 3 different senators and multiple councilors and House reps to try and get something done, and their feelings are that they're not a strong voice. So it's not only having that strong voice, it's almost having a more straightforward and efficient representation that is split apart when they find themselves encompassed in many districts. Some people think it's good to have more than one voice, but you still, has to be, the community still wants to feel that they have power. And so if they feel like they are a very small portion of a district and they're not enough to have an influence, then they feel marginalized. And we have been asked to not marginalize communities.
Thank you. That helps a lot. Co-Chair Phillips has a question.
Yeah.
Well, not a question. I just want to expand on the communities of interest. I mean, from what I understand, almost anything can be a community of interest. There could be a business association that wants to develop a certain area of a town or a city to make it more vibrant. So that would be a community of interest.
Yeah.
And a perfect example that I can read is I'm reading Chairman McNamara's letter to us, and he's talking about Patuxent Village, which is a historic site, and he's trying to keep it as one instead of splitting it up.
Right.
If we
It
need
is-
to,
it is split right
to
now,
keep it
yes.
as one, so that would
Yeah.
be a perfect example of what we would call a community of interest, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly right. And I want to thank the City of Cranston for sending me a very useful guide to the different neighborhoods in Cranston that we can reference. I would love to get that for every town that has the capability to delineate them, because we are using it in our efforts to try and keep neighborhoods together. Because I do know Patuxent is split now, and so that is redistricting is a way that we can try and fix problems that have come from past efforts.
Just remember, though, be careful what you wish for. You may get it.
Thank you. Go ahead. You can continue. Thanks.
Okay. I do want to reiterate that I do hope that everybody will be able to use my districting, and if we did create a tutorial step by step, but I am happy to assist further, because these are very useful for our as we release the drafts of the plans. We have the number 401-222-3876 to call, or our email that is also on the website is info@riredistricting.org. Please get a hold of us, and we'll do our best to assist you. This is the second to last of the traveling roadshow meetings. What's really important is hearing public testimony. We've talked about examples of communities of interest, and we'd like help defining them. That can be done through testimony, as has been in past meetings. I have offered some observations on the census efforts and the counts that have come from it, and we'd like to see if there are some pictures that can be painted from how the community understands what's happening from the census. And we look forward to hearing views on the redistricting process. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. It's a great turnout.
Brian, thank you. Before we turn it over to public comment, any members on the commission have any questions at all? Certainly. Mr. Lopes.
And not to whip the proverbial dead horse around communities of interest, but I do have a question around that. It's probably a dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. So, scenario, if I were a resident of Pawtucket and specific topic is of interest, but I've moved to North Kingston, where I live now in Saunderstown, can I still weigh in on a community of interest in Pawtucket?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it weighted differently because of proximity of where I am to a particular locale of that?
No.
Awesome.
You're in Rhode Island. This is a Rhode Island state effort. You have the same voice and the same weight as anybody with local knowledge.
So even though it's a localized issue you're raising, you're not confined to that locale to weigh in on that.
Not at all. Not at all. Please send us all your understandings of everywhere you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question. See, that's the first time that was raised. We all learned from that. Thank you. Any other questions anyone has? No, thank you, Ryan. At this time, we'll go to our witnesses. We have, it looks like 5 people signed up, and if there's anyone here who hasn't signed up after we get through the list, feel free to come up when we get to our last witness. You can say your name and whether you're affiliated with any particular organization, then feel free to testify. Our first witness is well-known to everyone here, John Marion from Common Course of Rhode Island. John, if you come up to the podium and then state your name and your organization, and then you may proceed.
Great. Good evening. John Marion from Common Cause, Rhode Island. Apparently, I'm well known. So I want to start, actually, I wasn't going to do this, but address communities of interest, because my organization's nationwide, and there was actually an interesting email thread among my other co-directors in other states looking for examples of communities of interest, because it is an interesting topic. And so I'll give some examples from other states that might not be appropriate here, but might enlighten you. So in California, people who are in certain wildfire zones want to be held together, because that's obviously a growing problem in California. Agricultural zones in California, water zones, because they have big water rights issues out there. In Ohio, it's people along the Lake Erie. So in Rhode Island, it might be certain parts of the bay. If you look at existing maps, I actually was looking at the maps once with somebody from Save the Bay, and they pointed out, that one way redistricting could sort of maximize things from their perspective is more people have a little bit of the bay, right? Which is a choice that could be made. Or conversely, fewer people representing more of the coastal zone. So there's a lot of ways to look at communities of interest that I think are really interesting. And as Ryan keeps saying, the only criteria is they just have to be geographically based, right? Children aren't a community of interest because they're interspersed throughout the population. So I just thought, since you're close to wrapping up this first round, I haven't spoken since the first hearing. I'd just share 3 thoughts, based on attending most of these hearings. So as at the first hearing on September 9th, I shared a letter that had been signed by Common Cause and a couple of dozen other organizations. And I just want to emphasize 3 things from that letter. One, I think you've already addressed a little bit tonight, and you're going to address, sounds like, in a special meeting about prison gerrymandering. I reached out to the Prison Policy Initiative. They are the technical experts in this, and they sent you a very detailed letter that I want to lift up 2 points in that letter. One is it's not too late. So they point out that the Pennsylvania Commission passed a motion to reallocate the prisoners, and then in just a few days, Pennsylvania, which is a far bigger prison population and far more prisons, were able to geo-relocate the vast majority of prisoners. The second thing is that you don't have to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Nobody is able to relocate 100% of the prisoners, right? But if you are able to relocate 80%, well, that's 80% of people who their home communities have better representation. And so it details some of the steps that were taken in other states that did this 10 years ago and some of the states that are doing it now. And it points out that Mr. Brace was actually the expert witness in a case in Cranston involving the wards where he geolocated about 80% of the prisoners. So he has done this before in the state of Rhode Island. So it's not something totally new. The second issue I want to raise is sort of like a larger issue than the prison gerrymandering, which is what I haven't seen the commission do is act collectively as a commission to discuss the trade-offs here. So I think Ryan and Kim have done a great job of saying, listen, you can't just, there are competing values. Compactness is in competition with the Voting Rights Act, which is in competition with, maybe some communities of interest, which is in competition with some of the other values. You have, a number of different things competing against each other to be the most important thing that is considered when drawing the maps. And they come from the U.S. Constitution, they come from the Rhode Island Constitution, they come from the Voting Rights Act, they come from your enabling legislation. That's where the idea of communities of interest comes from. And so far, there really hasn't been a discussion about how they should be prioritized. And without that discussion, the map maker is left to prioritize them. So my fear is, that the map maker gets a freer hand to do what the map maker wants to do if if you, on behalf of the public, isn't giving some direction there.
John, let me just interject for a minute and assuage any fears you may have there. As I said at the opening of the meeting, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have a meeting at the State House to deal specifically with this issue. So it doesn't fall on deaf ears. We've all been discussing this openly. There's been a lot of open dialogue. The public's come forth to put this as an issue that needs to be addressed. Senator Metz was at the forefront of this issue some time back. We're hearing you loud and clear, and that is why in the next 2 weeks, back at the State House, we'll have a meeting. We'll go into great detail on this and see if collectively we can fix the issue. But I want to make that public, and then please, just go ahead. We're hearing you.
Yep.
That's the feedback.
Great. But it's not just prison gerrymandering, it's this whole weighing these different values that are in competition, or in tension, I should say, with each other and acting as a body. The last thing is, wasn't mentioned in that letter we sent at the beginning, but we've seen interest grow as we've gone along, which is great, and I think the kind of, on Monday there were quite a few people there, which was great, but one of the things I heard Monday was, and I want to compliment, like, you've opened the door, right? This is live on Capitol TV. You can watch it online. It's accessible locations, but people sometimes need to be invited to go in the door. And so I think more needs to be done to make the community aware that these things are happening. So I've been spamming my list. If you're on my list, my lord, you've been getting a lot of emails from me. I reached out to all the neighborhood groups in Providence prior to that last meeting, and we did see some of the neighborhood groups show up. But I think, it's incumbent on the commission to try to do some more of that itself. One idea that somebody threw out at me the other day, many of you who are legislators probably have campaign email lists, in constant contact or some other form. You could send an email to your list just saying, hey, you're my constituent, I'm on this panel. You could, it's having a meeting. You could encourage, there's 113 members of the Assembly. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of those sorts of email lists. I know I'm on many of them. And just encourage people to show up and be proactive in that way, because I think you build these great tools, wonderful for people to be able to draw the maps, but they need to know it's there. And I'm trying to help. And I just think there's some creative ways for you to do that as well.
John, thank you. I always value your civic interest and input, and you bang the drum on the issues that need to be addressed publicly. Does anyone have any questions for John? Senator Metz.
Well, not so much a question. I would just say I like the diversity of the commission, because I'm going to bring some things to the table that they may not be aware of. For example, I'm still in my grandfather's house. I live 5 blocks from Amos' house. Well, not everybody that goes to Amos' house to eat is from Senate District 6. But we service them, Crossroads, 10 blocks away. And so all these people are coming into that part of Broad Street, just on the other side, because they ran them out of downtown. So now they're over in our district. So that's a special community of interest who may not have been counted during the census, but they're in our neighborhood every day, up Broad Street, near Central and Classical High School, near the Dunkin' Donuts and the McDonald's. So they're there. And so there's many things that all of us are going to bring to the table based on the neighborhoods where we grew up, where we live now, and based on what we've seen, based on experience, that we're going to bring to the table. So I'm confident that what you're talking about is going to be taking place, because no one would know what I'm talking about Amos' house, except for maybe Representative Diaz and Senator Quesada. But there's many things that we're going to bring to the table that we want the map makers to address. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Certainly, thank you, Senator Metz. Ryan, go ahead, please.
Thank you, John, very much. I just want to say for people who might be new to the process of this, we are releasing drafts of the map of the statewide plan hopefully next month. but that is exactly what it is. It's a draft. We're going to be hoping to gather new information to improve it. And sometimes, in my experience, it's those first drafts that really conjure up a lot of interest in the process that might not be existing right now. But when the ideas are put on paper, that's when a lot of interest comes up. It is not too late at all. We'll be keeping community interest in the process and taking in all ideas. And sometimes that first draft is what starts an increase of interest and submissions. And we will be taking them all in, just like now, we'll be taking them in. And they really, really do help us. You know, why would we move a district west when we can keep a community of interest whole by going north? You know, these are all things that we need to know. And you know, when the drafts are released next month, it is nowhere near too late. We will be listening intently to the community.
Thank you, Ryan. John, would you like to proceed?
Thank you.
Are you through? Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Marion by anyone? No. Thank you, John. Our next witness is Hannah Stephen of the Stern, S-T-E-R-N. Sometimes it's very difficult to read writing, particularly my own. And Hannah, actually, you wrote that correctly, and I thank Co-Chair Phillips for straightening
No,
that
I
out.
also, I am famous for writing my last name in a way that's almost impossible to read sometimes.
It's
so.
okay. We have it now. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Hannah Stern with the ACLU. You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members of the Commission, for your time this evening. Again, my name is Hannah Stern, providing commentary tonight on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island. With the perspective of what you've said about the upcoming meeting about prison gerrymandering, I will be extremely brief. But I do just really want to emphasize the importance of this issue as a part of this process. We're so glad that we've seen members of the public interested in this issue. We're so glad that we've seen members of the Commission really calling for action on this issue. And I really just want to emphasize again what John Marion shared and then what also the Prison Policy Initiative testimony says, which is that it's really not too late to act on this. As John said, gave as an example, and again, as the Prison Policy Initiative testimony notes, Pennsylvania really turned this issue around in a very swift time frame. So it's something that we can do. And as Senator Metz noted, we do lose an entire decade if we don't act on it this year. This is a very time-sensitive issue. We would lose an entire decade again before this discriminatory practice is addressed. We really urge the Commission to really very strongly consider ending this and end it. So thank you very much for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stern. Anyone have any questions, Ms. Stern? No. Thank you for coming and testifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness is Jess Signa. Jess, if you introduce yourself and just state if you're with an organization or for yourself.
Yes, thanks. Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm representing myself this evening.
Thank you.
I presented to you the first meeting, and I've been to a few, so thank you so much for all of the hard work throughout the past few weeks. I actually have two questions to present to you, and perhaps you can ask them of your colleague Ryan. I was wondering, as we know, census blocks are the smallest level of geography that are available that hold the population data in it that we can then sort of are the building blocks of districts. I was curious if there was going to be any proposed Senate or House districts that might split a block in pieces, and if that were the case, what data would be used to then sort of analyze that area.
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Ryan to answer that. Ryan?
We would not split blocks. No, we don't think that's I don't want to speak as a lawyer because I'm not one. I think that could be challengeable because you don't know the population that's within each of the portions of the block. So we don't do that for any Congress, State House, State Senate, or city wards. We keep blocks whole. Okay.
Thank you. And you said you had another question?
No, those were the
Okay.
two. It
Thank
was,
you.
if it was, what data would be used to do it.
I see.
So,
Thank
perfect.
you very much. Thanks for coming in. Any questions at all? Anyone? Thank you very much. Our next witness is Lenny Seol, or Seoy.
Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Seoy. Would you just state your name and
Yep.
if you're here for yourself or an organization?
Hi. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Hi, I'm Lenny Co, and I'm representing myself, and I'm a registered nurse.
Thank you.
My first question to the committee is, I just want to know who appointed, what your position is on the committee and who appointed you to it.
Well, I don't know that there's any basis for anyone at this point, while we're still in the research stage, to say, I think it's pretty well known that we have Senate appointees, House appointees, and then we have senators and reps. So speaking for the committee as a chair, I don't know if it's necessarily appropriate that we try to get into the weeds and talk about.
Oh, no,
things
it was just for my own
That's
information, that's all.
okay, that's okay.
All right, okay. All right, so I'm going to explain to you where my anger comes from. I'm a registered nurse, and I see what happens when these lines are drawn in the communities that are hurt by the way the communities are drawn. And you keep talking about communities of interest. I see the results of what happens. When the other night we were talking about a community in Providence where the asthma rates were very high, correct? All right. I started as a respiratory therapist, then I became a nurse, and then I moved on and did more in the nursing profession. I've watched those children grow into adults and watched the problems that they had over the years, which could have been prevented had the lines been drawn and they gotten the funding that they needed. Those are the communities of interest I'm talking about. I want to stop the pipeline to prison by denying these communities the numbers that they need to get the funding that they need. That's where my anger is coming from. That's why I constantly keep fighting for them. And I hope you understand that, because I see the results of what happens when people are ignored or forgotten about or don't get the education that they deserve to pull themselves out. I watch it, and we can stop it. All we need to do is do our jobs and do them correctly. And think about the people that we're impacting every time you draw a line. That's why it's so important that this prison problem gets solved, because the numbers will increase in those districts, and they can get the funding that they need. I'm tired of watching homeless people walk up and down Mineral Spring Avenue because they have nowhere to go. And then I have to take care of them at the end of the day. Things that can be prevented. That's why I'm here. And that's why I'll stay on this until it's solved. And I'll probably never see it solved, but at least I'll see some movement. So thank you for your time, and thank you for putting the time into this.
Thank you. Mr. CO, you may want to take that passion. You sound articulate, and clearly you care. You may want to take that passion, and you may be one that we could all benefit from by going into this redistricting and drawing some maps of those communities of interest that are passionate to you and getting them to Ryan. This is the kind of stuff we're all looking for. It doesn't, irrespective of what your own affiliation or personal interest may be, somewhere within that passion, there are answers that we may not all have. Like Mr. Lopes asking that question earlier. Well, I didn't think of that. I don't know if anybody else did, but it's the first time I heard it. You're passionate. Maybe you go in, take a look at the maps, draw something that you think will make a difference, get it to Ryan and Mr. Brace, and we'll certainly look at it. Can only
This is
help.
one of the most important things we've done in 10 years in this state, in a long time. And this is the first time we can actually solve a lot of problems. And I have no intentions of not being involved in this one way or another. But the main concern is the people that it affects. And if you ever want, spend a day with me and I can show you. So thank you again for your time.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Any questions for Mr. CO?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you very much.
Any questions before I go?
No, thank
All
you.
right.
Our next witness is Stephen Frias. Good evening, Mr. Frias. If you just state your name and if you're for yourself or any particular organization. Thank you.
Certainly. Stephen Frias, resident of Cranston. I am here to testify on my own behalf.
Thank you.
May I?
You may proceed.
May I do this? Okay, thank you.
I think the social distancing is in order. I wouldn't take it off completely in
No,
CCRI,
no,
okay?
hey.
I don't want to get,
I'm in here, that means I'm vaccinated, and I've been wearing a mask, so I'm
yes,
not-
sir.
Okay? So-
We all are.
So,
Go ahead.
all right, sorry. I'm just here to talk about 3 topics, I believe. First is about Cranston. I know on Monday you heard some testimony from our registrar about how there is a draft ward map for our city that was put together by a bipartisan independent commission. And I just want, and I'm speaking also in this capacity, is that I was the former chairman of the Charter Commission in Cranston, and I put together the charter amendment to prevent gerrymandering in Cranston. And we were, in the amendment states, we were to follow main roads, natural rivers, not break up neighborhoods, and not engage in any favoritism towards particular candidates or particular parties, et cetera. And so I really want to encourage you to honor that map when you're looking at your rep and senate maps, and not creating pocket precincts and creating situations where your lines are crossing over our lines, where it makes it very difficult for us to have a precinct that's more than, about 1,000 people, And in particular, to talk about the current maps now on Cranston reps and senate, and I'm just going to talk generally. And for example, in House District 16, I don't have the map right in front of me here, but if you look at it, it's kind of the shape of a longhorn, okay? And it breaks up 2 neighborhoods. It breaks up the Dean Estates neighborhood, and then it crosses I-95 and breaks up an Elmwood neighborhood. You don't need to break up those neighborhoods. You could all put it in Dean Estates, and it would be one compact district, and you would avoid 2 pocket precincts in Cranston if you did it that way. And I know District 16 at the time was Representative Palumbo. I understand why that was occurring, but he's no longer representing in the State House. The other district is District 17. District 17 is a very poorly formed district. It's basically 2 big splotches, one big splotch and a small splotch. It's connected by a very small piece of territory. You can work on that district to make it at least look more compact and normal. What basically occurred there, I believe, Representative Jackard represented that district. In 2011, he made the possible political error of voting against the Speaker, Fox, and so the lines are kind of a mess over there. So this would be our opportunity to try to work with those lines and fix some of the errors of the past. In regards to the Senate districts, I just want to make a couple of simple comments. One is, some of your Senate district, for example, 26, it includes most of Western Cranston, but then goes into the Laurel Hill area, which is a majority minority neighborhood. And so to me, you're crossing the river there as well. I don't understand why you'd need to do that. Probably a better community of interest would just be keeping Western Cranston as one Senate district and keeping that all together along with that area, versus breaking it certain neighborhoods up. And actually, if you follow the main roads and not break up neighborhoods, you'll be able to create compact districts that actually you may have the chance of creating a majority-minority district on the rep side in Cranston, following main roads, and close to it on the Senate side if you follow main roads and the river. So that's just something I wanted to say about the current maps. I don't need to, I can obviously draw a map if at my leisure, but I just wanted to say that. The second topic I just wanted to mention quickly is gerrymandering. And we all know that gerrymandering has occurred in the past, and I just wanted to make some comments about it in general. One is, I think you all know, the public actually does not like gerrymandering. I mean, in my charter amendment against gerrymandering, it specifically had the language on the ballot. 72% of the people voted to stop gerrymandering at the ward level. In Providence, they had a charter amendment that was similar to mine in 2012, and that passed 82% against gerrymandering. So the public really does not want to see games being played with the lines to benefit incumbents. Second, I saw the testimony of an attorney you had here talking about some of the legal requirements around redistricting, and I just wanted to comment on that quickly, is that gerrymandering in this state is actually prohibited legally. Okay, some people, we all talk about it as almost like it's, it's a shouldn't do, but it can be done. If you look at the 1966 case opinion of the governor, they specifically create a two-part test which says any deviation from natural, historical, geographic, and political boundaries to achieve a political gerrymander is constitutionally prohibited under the compactus phrase in the state constitution, and that any deviations must be explainable by rational, legitimate considerations. Obviously, that's something to be aware of, and what was not explained is that many of you are aware in 1983, we had a real debacle legally in this state with redistricting between the Leach and Quattrochi case, and then also in federal court with Farman versus Burns, which dealt with the situation of putting two incumbents together in the same district and the belief that it was about political retribution and they were just ignoring all neighborhood lines. So I would caution you strongly not to engage in gerrymandering, knowing the consequences it's been in the past. On an ethics front, I would say too is, in other states there's a kind of a view that there's a potential implicit conflict with legislators drawing their lines. Obviously in this state, the Constitution and the way we've set it up is that legislatures do draw the lines in the end. Just be aware that if you draw the lines to benefit yourself, you're always subject to the ethics code. There is no case on point in the ethics code about this, but I would just caution you that's another area which could come into play here. And at the Ethics Commission, as you know, legislative immunity does not apply. Last couple points on gerrymandering is, gerrymandering many times is not effective, so why bother doing it? I mean, in this state in the 1930s, the Republicans and Democrats took turns gerrymandering the House or Providence periodically. And what happened in the end was the number of Democrats elected from Providence in the State House rep side in Providence, went from about 17 in 1928 to about 18 in 1940. And this is after successive redistricting retaliations back and forth. And in Newport, for example, the Democrats tried to do redistricting to favor themselves. They ended up not making any progress in Newport in the next election. And then when the Republicans did it to retaliate back, they ended up losing control of the Newport delegation in the next election. And actually a rep who was very upset that she was being redistricted out of her seat, a Republican, and who changed the map to benefit herself, she was actually one of the Republicans thrown out in 1940. So it's actually an ineffective political strategy. And lastly, on that front, it boomerangs, as we all know. The Quattrochi example from 1983, where Senator Quattrochi lost control of the Senate and the Republicans made big gains on redistricting. And then what happened with the Senate in 2002 with Bill Irons, that was a very controversial situation, which led to, according to Phil West, retaliation against Bill Irons, where Bill Irons was coming after him, dropping the dime on Billy Irons on his issues. And in regards to Joe Montalbano, obviously he had to settle that lawsuit, which caused him to have to take a district that had more population in Lincoln than he lost in 2008. So redistricting can be done in this state, by the way, without a lot of gerrymandering, a lot of nonsense. It was done before in 1910, and it was an independent commission set up by the governor, and it was so well done that the province generally even applauded it. And the Democrats, who were the minority back then, went from having 10 seats in the House to 38 after the first real redistricting in the state, because it was done fairly. So I think I'm not saying that if you do it fairly, the Republicans will obviously gain, but I will say that it can be done fairly without a lot of nonsense. And one other comment I'll make, and I wasn't sure I was going to make it, but because you guys are talking about the ACI, I wrote some quick notes down because I don't really want to come out to Providence to make public comment, and it's as following. I was on a charter commission in Cranston. We got a lot of the same commentary and opinions about the prison issue, and my opinion was I didn't support what they were trying to advocate for, and it's as follows. They have three basic arguments against prison gerrymandering about why they say it's prison gerrymandering. One is prisoners, shouldn't be counted at the prison because they're transient, they can't vote, and they really aren't like a constituent. The problem is there are other people who are transient in this state, but we count them where they're at. That could be like college students from out of state, for example. We also, people who can't vote, well, we count people who can't vote all the time. Children, immigrants. In regards to they're not really constituents, you don't really interact with them. Well, you know, people are institutionalized. You really don't interact with them very much. Children, most of you don't get phone calls from small children either. So if you start making exceptions for prisoners and changing the census numbers for that, then it opens up other issues about who we should count, where they count. And it's going to get more politicized. And then they call it always this word gerrymandering. And I disagree with, other people have said this. I respect them on other things. I hope they respect me on other issues as well. I don't believe it's political gerrymandering at all. People have held those seats where the prisons have located, Republican or Democrat, since 1906. No issues. It's not favoring one party to count them there. Second, it's not a rotten borough system where you have like a small group of people are being represented. They get overrepresented. We have in Cranston, for example, a ward. Ward 6 is where the prison is located. They cast more votes and have more voters than some of the other wards in my city. So that ward is not being overrepresented because it has the prison. And there are other representative districts that are not overrepresented because they have the prison. And in fact, the prison here, the issue why it's not prison gerrymandering on top of it is, it's of 2,500 people essentially. These districts are about 14,500, 29,000. It's about 10% on the Senate side, 20% on the House side. It's not like in other states where there's this gigantic prison, and if you don't take them out, you'll end up having one rep representing, with a small neighborhood representing a whole area, most consisting of prisoners. And lastly, it's not racial. This case was brought to the First Circuit by the ACLU. And in that case, the First Circuit, which is not a conservative federal circuit, rejected their claims that there was gerrymandering there and noted that no one even raised the issue of voter dilution or issues of race. So doing something different is going to be an administrative headache. You'll probably hear that from Mr. Brace. You're talking about 2,500 people. It's not that much. And it's going to be very imperfect if you try to do it now. And these numbers are so precise, where people are, where this is, and we're going to kind of guess about where the prisoners were at one period of time or another. So I just want to make that comment now. I didn't want to come out to the State House, to be honest with you, and say all this then. But you'll hear the other side, certainly. But I wanted to tell you my perspective as someone who sat on your side listening to these arguments, that I do not believe that you should agree to them. This is how we've been doing it since 1906 in this state when we reapportioned the House. And I don't see the arguments as very compelling. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I've taken up longer than I should have, but I only want to come out here like once in a while. I really don't want to come out like
Mr. Frias, we appreciate your testimony, very informed, very articulate. Any questions for Mr. Frias from any members of the committee?
Yeah, I have a question.
Senator Felag.
We talk about gerrymandering, we talk about incumbency, and you talked about drawing maps that had two incumbents running against each other. What is your advice then on the districts that you were creating, the compactness? Did they put any incumbents together in the same district?
I think that's fine. What matters to me, and that's what the charter amendment in the city of Cranston was, you base lines on don't break up neighborhoods and look for main roads and natural features. You do not look at the residencies of the incumbents. That passed in Cranston with 72%, and it was explicitly stated. So just because two incumbents are put together doesn't bother me. It's when the lines are drawn in a weird way, an unusual way to put two incumbents together that would bother me. That's what occurred in 1982 with the Sappins and Leach issue with Quattrochi. But if you tell me two people who live pretty close to each other, the lines move, and they happen to be in the same district, as long as the neighborhoods are intact, I don't see what the problem is. I hope I answered your question directly.
No, you did. I mean, it's a question of, you have population shifts, obviously, that are going to create these differentials where, but then again, it depends upon where you start the map and where you move. Like I know, for instance, the last time, they basically started in Newport, which had a 4,000 less population, which created a shift in the East Bay of everybody moving north, that 4,000, 4,500, which had that particular movement. Now with the population increases in Providence, does that predicate that we start in Providence, or if we start in the East Bay and start moving, does that create an extra district, say, for a house maybe in Providence?
I think that you look at the population numbers, I think Providence is going to get another House district, naturally speaking, if you draw it correctly. And by the way, I know you're in the East Bay, and I want to say this also to Mr. Brace and Ryan here. I don't remember Mr. Taylor. You know, Rhode Island's a real tough place to draw lines with the East Bay. I mean, you know, that's a real, I mean, I don't like, when I try to draw maps, I always kind of save the East Bay for last because it's so difficult. And I know you in the East Bay start in the East Bay first and then move out. But I really do recognize how difficult it is with the East Bay. But yes, I believe Providence is going to end up with a new rep district. I mean, if you just look at the population increase there, and it's 4,500 is the number for a rep district, you know, I think you're going to see it.
Yeah,
Maybe an open speak.
I mean, right. In the East Bay, it's not only an issue with smaller populations in terms of smaller towns, but you have socioeconomic differences. For instance, a lot of times from a Senate perspective, you want to put Barrington with Warren because they had two conflicting interests, especially when we were talking back the state aid formula, and how one community like Bristol Warren lost $8 million over 10 years, whereas Barrington gained like $2 or $3 million.
Yeah, I mean,
so how do you represent both
Yeah,
of a community of interest?
Absolutely difficult because, you know, the way I look at things is like there's rural, suburban, and urban, and Warren is an extremely urban place, and Barrington is a much more suburban place. And suburban interests are different from urban interests, period. I mean, I've lived in an urban community, grew up in one, born in one, and I live in a suburban one now. There's different types of people in those communities. They care about different types of things. So when I look at communities' interests, I sometimes, you know, Mr. Taylor was talking about within a rep district. Sometimes I think of it also as rural communities should be together and suburban communities should be together and urban communities put together. When you're in a situation in the East Bay, not only do you have the water, but you got the Massachusetts border to the east, and somebody's not going to be happy. Right. I mean, I wanted to be fair with you when I say that. So.
Thank you, Senator. Any more questions for Mr. Frias? Thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
your testimony.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Ryan has a comment.
Not a question, just a comment. According to the data that as we look at it, you know, Warwick is losing about a quarter of a seat of a House seat, and Providence is set to gain about a third of a House seat, and Cranston's right between the two. So it could be interesting to see how Cranston turns out here, because it's right in the middle of this force of population shift.
Thank you for amplifying on that, Ryan. Sir, I know you wanted to, would you come up to the podium, please? And if you would state your name and whether you're here for yourself or an organization, please.
Thank you. My name is Jeremy Ricks. I'm a city council member here in Warwick.
Jeremy, how do you spell your last name, if you would?
R-I-X.
Jeremy Ricks. Absolutely. Okay, please, you may proceed.
Thank you. First, thank you to Ryan, to the chair and members of this commission, especially for coming out here to Kent County and each county to seek local input. I think that this has been really helpful. Let's see. I'll get started with some comments that I prepared and then go into a little bit more detail based on some of the additional information that I've heard. So, Starting off, Warwick is a city of villages. The last redistricting recognized many of these traditional lines of these different village areas and kept them intact on the maps. I understand that really at this point with the Commission's work, it's more about the state and rep districts, but these obviously, with the precinct lines being drawn, do affect the localities as well. So keeping these villages intact and the shared interests allows the communities to more effectively advocate. And I suppose switching gears a little bit, in my own experience on the city council, really growing up in the Norwood Village, where we have a strong neighborhood association, that's something that helped mold my interest in politics and advocating for my neighborhood, as well as simply getting involved more in Warwick, learning about my city. And so when I was first elected, one of my goals was to try to empower these different communities. And so I went over to the Pilgrim area, for example, and we were able to really get started, organized on a neighborhood association, had several meetings, all pre-COVID. And we were really able to get some things done with bringing people together. This would be much harder, of course, if some of these neighborhoods were split apart. It's harder to have those community meetings where multiple city councilors have to coordinate with each other, and on the resident side, for the residents to walk into a meeting, not know who's representing them, have to approach several different people, and of course, as has been discussed before, this all leads to the dilution of that community's power and ability to effectively advocate. Now, although I will say that I believe that the lines in Warwick, the various precinct and district lines, were drawn, relatively speaking, effectively during the last census, this has not always been the case. I remember some years ago looking at the maps and seeing that the Norwood Village was split apart in a very unusual way, leading to confusion on where people vote, who represents them on the council, and who represents them in the General Assembly. Or when Hoxie North was split off from the Spring Green neighborhood, which some would believe to have been done for electoral reasons back at that time, which had the unfortunate side effect of affecting that community's ability to effectively unite with neighbors in Spring Green on that same side of Warwick Avenue for their shared interests, such as concerns regarding the airport and Spring Green Pond. I certainly cannot speak for all of Warwick, but I can say from my experience on the City Council for Ward 2 that I find the lines drawn for the boundaries of Ward 2 to be helpful in that 2 of the 3 lines respectively run across the Patuxent River, rather along the Patuxent River, and along Warwick Avenue, which are clean boundaries that keep neighborhoods together. This includes keeping the Hoxie North neighborhood united in the same precinct as the Spring Green neighborhood on their side of Warwick Ave, where Spring Green Pond is essential to both communities and where the airport remains an issue. The third line, though it has its limitations due to the ways that the census blocks are drawn, generally separates the Pilgrim and Spring Green neighborhoods on one side from the Sand Pond or Massasoit neighborhood on the other side. Villages should be kept together as much as possible to better enable residents to advocate for their shared interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Councilman Ricks. Any questions for Councilman Ricks from any members of the committee? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else here who would like to testify? Yes, please. Would you come up and state your name and whether you're with a particular organization?
Hello.
Good evening.
My name is Kamika.
How do you spell that, please, Kamika?
Kimika.
Certainly.
I use she, they pronouns. I am a resident of Providence. This is my first time experiencing this redistricting process, so I'm very interested in it. I have a couple of questions and then like comments or whatever. So my first question is, I'm very interested in the prison gerrymandering conversation. And so I know you said you all are having a conversation in 2 weeks. So I just want to make sure, I want to confirm or clarify whether that meeting is going to be public.
Oh, yes,
not?
that'll be public. It'll be at the State House. We'll let you know the exact date. It will be posted, and you'll know the exact date. So please come to that by all means.
Okay. And then I also, sorry. And then another question, I'm just curious as to why this is the second forum that I've been to and why there's no conversation amongst the committee members around these issues or like anything that's come up in these meetings from questions from the public. There seems to be no conversation between committee members. And so as a resident, as someone who's interested in this, as someone who's knocked doors and like had to figure out on what side of the street someone lives on to figure out who their representative is, I'm very interested in the priorities, the things that the committee members think of as important, the communities of interest that you all think should be prioritized. I'm very interested in that conversation. I'm just very curious as to why I haven't seen that.
Well, if I may, this is the first round of getting out to the public so that we can bring this information out to the state of Rhode Island in every corner that we possibly can and let people come and build a dialogue that way. But we're all, frankly, increasing our own learning curves to this. We're taking the information in, trying to assimilate it, put it together. We learn, as I said earlier, I didn't know earlier, Mr. Lope's question about whether or not you could have a community of interest actually jump from one town to another just based on your affiliation. I never thought of that, didn't think of the answer. I learned something tonight from that. So we're all gathering information, learning, and then we'll have another round, and there'll be dialogue involved, and we certainly will have a meeting of the minds before anything is finally put together. But don't think for a second that the fact that we're not all sitting here saying, you know, what do you think, what don't you think, that dialogue's not going to happen. Rep. Kazarian.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment as well. First of all, welcome. And it's my first experience with redistricting, too. And I want to say to your comment, part of the reason why we're taking these out to the communities is to hear from you. So really, this process is more about us listening to you and listening to your comments and concerns versus us kind of telling you what we think. This is more about like the listening portion, I'd say, versus us talking about it. So that's really why we're coming out to the districts. We want to hear from you, and I, again, want to just thank you for coming out. Everybody that's spoken tonight, it does help. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rep. The Rep said that far better than I ever could have tried. See how there's a process. Go ahead, Kamika. Sorry, go ahead. Thank you, Rep.
I guess from my understanding of the process is that you all are coming around and we're public interest and we're giving comments, and then in a month they're releasing maps. So my concern is that the maps and the communities of interest are solely determined by the company, by whoever this is that's making the maps. And so I'm just concerned about that in-between part of who's giving them what. I understand that they have to follow the laws, but also there are interests from the committee, right? You all, as much as I understand, the committee has interest, right? And so those interests are going to show up in this map. And so I'm wondering, why isn't there conversation for the public to see and hear around that? You know, because it sounds as if you're coming around, we're giving comment, we're saying we want a conversation around prison gerrymandering, and that's been talked about like for several weeks, I think, right? So now we're just not saying that you're going to have a conversation about it. But before that, it seems like we're having these public forums, citizens come, we tell you we want this, we want that, we don't understand the process, whatever. And then they're putting out maps, and then we do this again. So again, I'm asking, when does the committee members have conversation with each other around what's going to be the priorities for drawing these maps?
Yeah, I think the Rep answered that, but let me try again to say that, and the prison example is the best example. You know, we came here to all these different locations to gather information, to assimilate it, and then try to have that all put back into the system based on public data and input and drawing districts, what we hear from the public here. And we've heard this outcry, if you will, about the prison population, and there isn't any finalized answer yet. Mr. Fry has had one perspective on it. We've heard other perspectives on it. Senator Metz has a perspective. He's been actively involved in it for some time. I know he wants to speak. And so it's a process of having this dialogue, as Rep. Kazarian just said, with the public at this point, and then we're going to get to that. So don't take the fact that we're not here taking on personal questions as if something isn't happening that should happen. This is a process of gathering information and making sure that we listen to you and your input. Senator Metz.
So,
Yes,
sorry,
thank you.
before you speak, Senator Metz, Mr. Metz, can I just clarify to make sure I'm understanding what you just said?
Sure.
So are you saying that the comments that are being expressed here are being taken into consideration by the consultants? Yes. And then they decide what public comments are important, how to prioritize them, and then put them in the map? Is that what's happening?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that the commentary that you hear is being taken into consideration by all of us. We're an active, real-time, fluid committee that's taking all of this information in to assimilate it, working in concert with the experts and with you. This is a symbiotic process involving everyone. It's not someone in some ivory tower to the exclusion of others. It's not that way. I certainly don't see it that way. I don't think any of my colleagues see it that way. It's a process involving all. Senator Metz?
Yeah, just like for me, the first thing I had to do was to try to increase the awareness of my community. So I contacted the head of the Ministers Alliance. My wife belongs to the Rhode Island 100 Black Women. And there's other people that are more connected in various things. So the first thing I wanted them to know that this process was taking place and where they could go to the website to look at the information if they had any concerns. Then working with my community. Now, when I get the feedback, because it's not about me, when I get the feedback from my neighbors and the people that have vested interest in it, and for me, knowing that the 1st Black Regiment during the Revolutionary War and helping George Washington and everybody else. So we have made our contributions as African Americans in Rhode Island since the Revolutionary War. Senator Charles Walton, my predecessor, it wasn't until the 1980s, mid-80s, that we've got our first Black senator. I'm the second. And so for me, we need more representation. So, and folks know it. I'm looking out for African American representation because it's Black and brown representation in the state to maximize it based on the data, whatever it is, and to protect what we already have. So that's why I sued the state 20 years ago. It was Metz versus Almond in the state of Rhode Island. The state spent over $2.5 million defending the case, and I did that for Senator Walton because what happened was, I believe it was Senator Irons. He got on the wrong side of the Senate leadership then, and they cut the black vote at Blackstone Street, and he lost the election. So I'm here. So he asked me for help. That's when I sued the state. Then after I sued the state, they talked me into running for office. Then, but the whole story of it is I'm here to protect the interests of our community, and there will be dialogue because when they start drawing these maps, I don't want to say I'm going to sue again, but if it goes out to left field, again, I'm going to be the first one down there getting help. And it was the Lawyers for Civil Rights. We had the Lawyers for Civil Rights. We didn't have any money. It was me, the Puerto Rican Political Action Committee, the NAACP, Cliff Montero. We had Morris and Forrester. There was a law firm from California that was flying lawyers in from San Francisco to help us out, Lawyers for Civil Rights under the law from Washington, D.C. It was a big law case. And we finally settled out of court, and Joe Montalbano's name was mentioned. For me, if one senator had agreed to change their boundaries to create a district for an African American, that would have been a miracle. Well, God be the glory. There was 8 to 10 senators that agreed to change the boundaries to create the district that I used to represent. So, that's awesome. And then as Senator Montalbano gave up some of his territory, his home territory in North Providence to create the district that I have, and then 2 elections later, he lost. And that's why I have so much respect for him, because he created a district to make sure that my community was represented. So so again, to get back, so the point for me is I have to make sure, because not everybody in my community has a computer. Not everybody is sophisticated to the political process. So that's why I went through the Ministers Alliance and the Rhode Island 100 Black Women and other groups to make sure that they knew that this process was going on. I'll be tapping into a former Councilman Louis Aponte, who's very adept at drawing the maps that helped us out the last two census. So now, once I get the feedback from my committee, knowing the history of what took place in the past, knowing that the goal is to increase minority representation of Black and brown population, then I'm going to bring it back here, and I'm going to share that. And prayerfully, the process is good. It's much more open than it was 20 years ago. It's a much better process than it was 20 years ago. I'm sure that there's still kinks that have to be worked out, but many of us are here to make sure that our community is represented. And so that's the process we're at now. So we're just taking it all in. But don't believe me, when them maps come out, put on the shield, because that's when the fireworks start.
Thank you, Senator Metz. Priceless experience. Please go ahead, Kamika. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. And then, sorry, you answered like 4 questions in that explanation. So then the communities of interest. I'm wondering why the communities of interest that was drawn in the last census, are those being looked at for this census to see, like, or have those communities shifted? Have those interests shifted? Should they still be a community of interest? Like, do we just start over every time?
That's a great question, and I asked that question some time back, right? A couple of meetings. I wondered the same question. I asked it, and we didn't even seem to have communities of interest, right? Ryan, you want to amplify on it?
The census does not draw any what they would call a community of interest. I mean, they draw things like school districts. They don't draw. They symbolize them, you know.
I can clarify the question. Like,
okay.
In Rhode Island, the communities of interest that were designated in the last census that were like looked at and helped to draw the maps, are those communities of interest being looked at for this map drawing to see how those have changed?
I mean, I'll use an example. I mean, and it's much bigger than a community of interest that we talked about. The very first draft of the Senate map 10 years ago split the town of East Greenwich, I think, 4 times into 4 different districts. They came out as a large contingent of the community, and to say, please do better. You have taken our voice away from being able to be represented in the state, and they helped us think of some different options to be able to better serve the town of East Greenwich. And the final maps had them only with 2 senators, with one, a large part of the District 35.
Excuse me, Ryan. Rep. Corvacey.
Yeah.
Before you continue, perhaps I misunderstood, but I thought that the entity of community of interest was something that was pertaining to this census and not previous. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if that is correct, then community of interests are being considered now, and community of interests were not considered in the past, then there's no frame of reference of community of interest. So I think that's what you're asking.
Right, yeah.
Am I correct? So the answer is no community of interests have been saved because community of interests were not drawn in that respect or in that regard for that particular type of entity 10 years ago.
I only heard the term myself like about a year ago.
Well said.
It is a kind of modern.
So to answer her question more directly, with all due respect, and I know you were getting there, there were no community of interests designated 10 years ago.
Okay.
Something new now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you.
Thanks. And just out of curiosity, why do we have to wait? Why is there a waiting period when you register for the site?
For drawing districts,
Yeah.
to keep it centered on for Rhode Island residents and increase the security of the site.
So you're checking it against something to make sure I'm a
It's
Rhode Island resident?
bots. There's, we have to, we don't verify that you are a resident like just by looking at your address or anything. But that does. I mean, I check about twice a day, to approve, and I approve probably like in the morning and then after work. So it is kind of a mechanism that just ensures that the user is a legitimate user, not a troll or a bot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm just curious, because they only asked for your name and email address.
Mhm.
So just wondering why it took such a long
It's just a small security feature. I do check. I've checked twice a day on average to approve of users. Yeah.
So I would just end with comments, I guess. And this will go back to, I guess, because I was at the meeting on Monday. And so I just want to encourage the committee, for one, thank you for your time for doing this. But also, I think it's important that you recognize that you're in a position of power. And so when you're interacting with us, there's a power dynamic that needs to be recognized, and understand that we are looking to you as our representative voice. And if we don't think that you're representing our voice, understand that you have your districts, because some of you are reps and some of you are senators, and you have your districts, so you have these are my people. But whenever there's a citizen here speaking in front of you, you're representing all of us. And so I was very, very upset on Monday at the way that the panel responded to my comrade when he gave comments. It was very disrespectful. And then on top of that, he was corrected, and someone who was out of line, out of the process, there was no comments made to that person. Then I got out of line, then comments were made to me. So there's power differentials that you all have to be aware of. And these meetings are not accessible. I don't care, I'm sorry, they're not accessible. The Secretary of State's website, you cannot easily find this information about where these meetings are, what time they are, any of that. Also, I learned about this location at the meeting on Monday. There was no mention that you need to have your COVID, you need to have a negative test, or you need to have your vaccination card. I understand, I talked to the students, and understand that is a policy of CCRI's campuses, but I don't go to college campuses. I work from home, and I hang out in my community. I don't carry my vaccination card around with me.
Excuse me, Mr. Reyes.
I want to thank you for your comments and for attending the meeting. It takes a lot of courage to come to these meetings and to speak your voice. I'm a member of the community as well. Some of us are appointed public appointees, and we're learning the process as well. And out of respect and to be just to the citizens, we don't communicate our opinions right up front. We want to make sure that we can evaluate every town, every city, and make a judgment or a consensus argument based on everything we've heard. So we don't, especially myself, I can only speak for myself, no disrespect why I don't, conversate about certain topics or things that have been discussed, because we want to evaluate what everybody has been said and then go back and discuss it amongst ourselves, because we're learning just as you. And even through the process of checking in, many members are not present because of that, or whatever the case may be. I didn't know I had to bring my COVID test as well. And those are facility, I believe, restrictions, because we've been to other facilities where they don't require that. So I do commend you, and it is sometimes, uncomfortable to do certain things, but we're learning together. And by you being here and speaking, we just don't want it to be a stage of anger or violence, because we're not going to accomplish anything doing that. We're here to serve the public. Many of the elected officials, too, were unjustly criticized for things that this was not the place. And I'm not talking about your comrade. I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying this is a place for us to grow and make changes that are going to affect us long term. Instead of pointing fingers at each other, we need to work together, to make it better.
I completely understand.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes.
For saying that. I feel like there should be a clarifying point, I guess. Maybe it's because I'm used to the process or something, but as a citizen who knows nothing about redistricting, when I come to these meetings, is more to figure out like what is happening. Like normal person committees have information before you come to these meetings, right? Typically, you have information before you come to the meeting. You absorb them, and then you are able to respond to citizens. That was my expectation coming into this. So that's why I'm curious about why there's no conversation happening amongst the committee members. Understand that you have to listen to us and get our feedback and absorb it and digest it and then figure out how to make it work into the program. But that wasn't explained. That's not clear to me as a citizen. And it's not clear. You keep saying that the dates and the times and the locations are out on the website, but they're not easily accessible. You have to search through the Secretary of State's website to get the information. I'm on the computer all day. It took me 20 minutes to find the information. So again, all I'm saying is that if you want citizen participation, these spaces, these things needs to be accessible, which means that if there are requirements for getting into buildings, whomever is in charge of scheduling should put that information out.
Kamika, excuse me. Ryan, go ahead.
I'm not going to pretend that a single website is the end-all, be-all of a perfect outreach. I'm not an expert in outreach, I want to be a part of a great outreach system. We do on redistricting.org have the calendar, and the state did make known to us all the COVID restrictions that exist in each venue. And I do see that for CCRI Warwick, we do say proof of vaccination or negative results from rapid test are required.
But that's the website, you have to know about the website.
Yes, that is correct, yes.
I was told to go to the Secretary of State's website. That's where everything is, but that's not on the Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
That's just I just want to make it out. I'm not trying to have a back and forth about what's available, what's not available. I just want you to be aware of these things.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Ms. Ransaw.
I think maybe going forward, we could try to get the schedule tweeted or on the state Facebook page. Maybe grab someone's email here, and we can make sure there's an open line of communication. Oh, and it is on Twitter, House and Twitter.
Thank you, Ms. Ransaw. So you see, it is tweeted and on the House and Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent insight. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, very brief comment.
Yes, Rep. Diaz. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Also, I just want to comment that when I was in my way to CCRI, I was surprised that one of the local AM radio station was announcing the meeting tonight for CCRI. Just as another venue that maybe get into the ears of some people in our community. But we all know, despite your point, I think you are absolutely right. Need to be done better outreach to the community, especially people of color who maybe don't have the time to looking around. Has to be more accessible and easy for all of Rhode Islanders. So thank you for bringing the attention to this before we finish this process. So thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Thank you for your testimony, Caprice. We get a lot out of it. Thank you. Kamika, strike that. Kamika, thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to testify before we wrap it up for the night? Well, thank you, everyone. We have a nice attendance here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And again, we will see you at our next meeting, which will be in Warren. And so, does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.